and Trade. Are you taking it, Deputy? It's on the consequences of a proposed new settlement in Hebron, West Bank, for Palestinian residents. The Deputy has 4 minutes. Sorry, 2 minutes, Deputy. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach, and first of all I'd like to thank the County Coroner's Office for allowing us to bring this very important issue to the House of the Oireachtas here this afternoon. I suppose from my own personal experience, having been in Hebron about 6 months ago, I saw firsthand the plight of the Palestinians within the city. And I actually saw the building itself, the Rahibi house. And there was a doubt about the legality of the purchase of the house. And that has been decided by the Israeli Supreme Court. And the ruling there is that the house has been legally purchased. But the final decision will be with the Minister of Defence. The significance of this is that in Hebron itself, the impact that it will have on the Palestinians that are living there. I already saw it myself, where the whole centre of the city of Hebron has been virtually sterilised. No Palestinians can actively engage in business, no Palestinians can live within the centre of Hebron, and no Palestinians can actually walk through the city of Hebron. Can I say, Minister, if I was walking to you in the city of Hebron and I was a settler, I could walk straight across the floor. If I was a Palestinian, I'd have to take a circumventive route all the way around the building to come back and meet with you. That is the life of the Palestinians living there. It will also split the communities within the city of Hebron, and it will also increase tensions which are already rising within the city at the moment. This is part and parcel of a whole wider issue. There is negotiations going on as part of a sort of a sham peace process that's taking place between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which happens to be split at the moment. Within the whole West Bank area, there is a policy by the Israelis of not forcibly but gradually removing both farmers from land and householders from their own properties. So, Minister, what I would hope you do in your response, that you will give a very strong response in favour of the Palestinians, particularly those in the Hebron areas, because within the location of this house that has been purchased, there will be sterilisation, businesses will close, people from the locality, Palestinians, will have to generate their activity elsewhere.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Nolan, 2 minutes, Deputy.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister, I had the privilege of visiting the West Bank, Gaza and Israel last year. And of all the situations of complete abnormality that I came across, and that was evident on between the two, Israel and Palestine, and the two peoples clashing and so on, I think a more toxic environment I have not come across than that pertained in Hebron. We're talking about quite a large Palestinian city in the West Bank, solidly in the West Bank, nowhere near the state of Palestine, with settlements cropping up and popping up all around over the last number of years. But in the centre of Hebron, the historic centre where the markets once flourished and where shops once existed, settlements have gone up over the last number of years. And they have expanded and caused this complete collapse. I often say that to people in Galway when I recount the trip, it's like walking down Shop Street in Galway, with all of the shops closed, no one allowed to walk on it except the few settlers, and all the Galwegians told they had to keep away. That's how absolutely appallingly treated the native residents are of Hebron, the Palestinians. And this expansion of these little outlets, these little settlements which are expanding into one another gradually and slowly, into this new area called the House of Contention, which has been something that has been signalled for quite some time, since it was illegally purchased in 2007, March 2007, with forged documentation, and which has seen itself going to the courts over the last number of years, is another symbol of just how powerless, helpless, and how destructive the attitude is in that Hebron. I think Hebron is really the centre, for me, of showing the hatred, the viciousness on both sides, and the lack of trust. If this settlement goes ahead, I think we lose all hope, really, that there is this genuine attempt to have a two-state solution. If we allow this to go ahead. And what we're asking, Minister, is that this is ultimately going to be a political decision in Israel. It has to go through the Israeli Minister of Defence. And regardless of the European Union position and the international position, I would like the Irish position to be articulated, that we are against the expansion of these settlements, and that we will communicate that to the Israeli government.
Thanks, Deputy. The Minister has 4 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, Deputies, for raising this issue. The Taoiseach has consistently made very clear the Government's strong criticism of and opposition to Israeli settlements and settlement expansion, which are illegal under international law and constitute a major obstacle to peace. Settlements and related policies in Area C seem designed to drive Palestinians off the bulk of the land they occupy and to crowd them into the cities under Palestinian Authority control. Their establishment and the policies implemented to support them inherently involve continual injustices, hardships and humiliation for Palestinians, and are perhaps the main source of tension between the two communities on the ground. I think both deputies, through the analogies they've used, of Deputy Nolan talking about the difficulty in somebody coming to approach me, and then Deputy Nolan has used the analogy there of how this could compare to Galway, have made very clear the injustices that are involved in these arrangements. The Israeli government and Israeli public opinion are in no doubt whatever about our views on this issue. The city of Hebron presents a showcase or a microcosm of these issues in action. It is the largest city fully in the West Bank, and with 170,000 Palestinian inhabitants and 7,000 Israeli settlements in a large settlement on the outskirts. In the centre of this ancient city, some 850 settlers have established a number of small scattered settlements around the old town. In many cases, settlers simply occupied buildings, and the new settlement was subsequently recognised by the Israeli authorities. To protect the settlers and their rights, a large force of Israeli soldiers is also based in the centre of Hebron, and Palestinian residents have been subject to extensive movement controls, as both deputies have referred to, and excluded altogether from the main street and other areas in the interests of the small minority of settlers in their midst, again creating the atmosphere that both deputies have described. As a result, many Palestinian businesses in the old city have closed down. In March, the Israeli Supreme Court issued a ruling anticipated for several months on the purchase by Israeli settlers of a house in Hebron, or known as the House of Contention, or Rajibi House. The ruling upheld a 2012 decision by the Jerusalem District Court that the purchase of the house was legal and that the settlers should be allowed to resume living there. This house, which is a large apartment building, would constitute the nucleus for a new settlement in Hebron, the first established in the city since the 1980s. It would inevitably be accompanied by new security checkpoints and closures, and further develop pressure on Palestinian residents. There is a strong possibility that its occupation would lead to further tension and violence in the area, and when there are clashes, the response is always to further restrict and exclude the Palestinian residents. The next stage in the process, as the deputies have acknowledged, is for the Israeli Defence Minister to authorise and permit the transaction. Until then, the settlers are still prohibited from entering the building. And both deputies have asked for an elaboration of the Irish position in relation to this. So I want to emphasise the following. Ireland calls on the Israeli Minister of Defence not to grant the purchase permit for the building, given the very sensitive political nature of the settlement. Both Israelis and Palestinians are engaged in this moment at direct negotiations, which are intended to decide within months all questions in relation to the future of settlements. Ongoing settlement announcements such as this have clearly been damaging to confidence in the peace process. Israel has regularly announced new settlement units since the talks began, including significant plans for over 2,300 new housing units in 6 West Bank settlements announced in March. In relation to the European Union position, and I'm concluding on this point, Cathaoirleach, High Representative Ashton strongly condemned the latest settlement announcement on behalf of the EU and stated that such actions undermine the current negotiations and, as a consequence, the two-state solution. She urged the Israeli authorities to reconsider their plans and to reverse their decision. Ireland fully supports that position, and I want to emphasise this in the Dáil to both deputies. More broadly, the Taoiseach has also called for the international community to be forceful in its response to continued settlement expansion, and Ireland has supported all measures by the EU to increase pressure on the Israeli government on the issue of settlements. We will continue to be active on this issue. Thank you, Cathaoirleach.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Lawler, supplemental, just 1 minute, if that's okay.
Okay. I actually very much welcome the strong viewpoint that the Minister has spoken about here, and strengthens the view of many people throughout this country and throughout the EU too as well, with regard to what's actually happening on the ground in the West Bank at the moment. Unfortunately, words don't seem to have any much effect with regard to the Israeli policy on settlement expansion within the West Bank. And obviously actions that we need to take place is a boycott of settlers' product that's been sold in the EU. And something as strong as that is required, because words don't seem to have much of an effect on Israeli, no matter how strong a condemnation we put forward here, both in this chamber and in the EU too as well. It does not seem to have an effect on Israeli policy on settlement expansion. So I would hope that we would take this further, that a boycott of settlers' product throughout the EU might show that we are actually serious, that if there is a serious policy with regard to a peace process that's ongoing in Israel, which I believe is a sham to show that there may be talking going on but nothing actually happening on the ground.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Nolan.
And thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister, I want to thank you very much for that extreme